Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First, thanks for coming to my channel. I appreciate it. If you would, it'd help me a great deal if you'd hit the like button on the way out, and I'd love it if you'd subscribe. There's over 125 videos here, varying topics about metalsmithing, in particular silversmithing. So, especially if you're a beginner, this is a good place to get lots of information from, watch some tutorials, and find some techniques that you might not have heard of. So. Special thanks today to Linda E., who is my patron over on Patreon, and she upgraded from the second tier to the Silver Stars tier, which is the third tier. So thank you for that, Linda. I appreciate that. If you're interested in Patreon, you can check out the link in my video description down below. Over on Patreon, I have all sorts of exclusive content. I'm constantly adding to it. And there's multiple tiers of membership you can check out with different privileges. So if you're interested in that, check out the video description for a link for that. There's also a link to my website. And if you just want to show your appreciation for my content, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link. So keep me in coffee. So let's talk about today's video. I thought we could make a pendant today. I've seen a number of different pieces online in various places that inspired me to come up with this one, but I wanted something that would frame this kind of oval Labradorite that has a briolet top on it. And so we're going to try to do that. I'm going to put a little pale tourmaline up top of it, and we'll see how it turns out. So here's the two stones that I have. I have this Labradorite, which has kind of a faceted top on it. It's a cab, but it's it's flat bottomed, but it's got kind of facets on the top, and it's got a bluish tinge. So picked out this little rectangular stone, which is I think it's a pale blue tourmaline. So technically it's Indicolite, which is fun to say. So I'll be putting that up top. This is kind of a drawing of what I had in mind right here. Let's make sure you can see that. Got the stone connected to a bar. I think I'm going to use 12 gauge square wire for that. And then I'm going to use 10 gauge square that I kind of pound to flatten it out to get more of a kind of a curvaceous look over on the sides. It's kind of retro-y. I like kind of 50s, 60s, mid-century modern looking stuff. And that's what this looks like to me. So we're going to do something like that. We'll put that rectangular tourmaline right on top here, and then on the back of that that bezel setting that we make for that, I'll drill a little hole in the sheet that I put on the back, and then we'll mount some hidden bales, two of them, one on either side of the back there, for a chain to go through. So that's my thought, and let's see if we can make that happen. So okay, I think let's make the bezels first. So let's start with the little Labradorite. I'm going to put this stone in this little thing so I don't knock it off the table, which is SOP for me. Get a curve started on this that way. Going to continue that this way. I always find it's easiest when you're making a bezel if you leave it attached to the the full-size piece, so you have something to hold on to. But this is an easier way, I think. I always make these into angular shapes before I solder them. Everybody thinks that's weird, but I find it's easier to get a nice clean solder joint if you have them straight onto each other, 90 degrees. Just push them past each other to make it a little springy on the bottom. Line them up. Usually, without too much messing with them, you can have a pretty seamless look on your bezel. Cut myself a few pieces of solder. It's always good to have a few spares around. quickly reshape this. Used to be when I first started doing this that bezels took me forever to make. And I thought I'd never ever get faster at it, but I did. Actually, I can crank out a bezel in 2 or 3 minutes anymore, if I'm moving pretty quick, which I don't know if I am today or not. Let's see. Just kind of fine tuning here. I forgot to go over the materials at the beginning. I'm going to use a piece of 12 gauge. I think I mentioned that, going upwards. For this one I'm using 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, and it's 28 gauge. That'll be for the bezel for this one as well as the faceted stone. And I think I'm going to use some 10 gauge square wire. And I think I kind of eyeballed it on my drawing here. And it came out to be about, to make sure I had plenty, I made it a little bit longer. So I cut 2 1/4 inches for each of these. So there's going to be one on this side and one on this side. So for the back of this bezel, I'm probably going to use 26 gauge sterling silver sheet. I might use a little bit thicker for the other one since I'm going to be mounting those hidden bales on the back. So I might use 22. This stuff here is a little bit thicker. So for the bottom of this one, I'm going to use 26 gauge sterling sheet, and probably 22 for the other one since we're going to attach something sort of structural on the back. Let's go ahead and put it back on this guy. Right there, got plenty of solder over here. So let's get this guy attached. For a bezel this size, put 5 or 6 of these in here and just push them up against the sides. Doesn't even matter if they're scattered around, as long as you get it to the right temperature and everything's in contact where it's supposed to be. It should wick along the bottom seam there. Always go around an extra time or two to make sure we get a seam all the way around. Now I'm just trimming it off right at the base here. Sometimes when I'm doing this I forget I'm shooting a video and I need to explain what I'm doing. Hence the drifting out of frame sometimes. Set him to the side for the moment. Let's grab this little stone here. Put this on here so you can see what's going on. It kind of blends into the table. Okay, when you're doing something with corners like this, you never want to have the solder joint meet in a corner, because then that corner will look much different than all of the rest. So when I'm measuring this for a bezel here, I'm going to bend it like that, so it's going to meet in a side somewhere there. So just kind of eyeball it here a little bit. It's trying to do that, it's just a little bit too small. I made the corner a little bit too close. So I'm going to migrate that corner just a little bit. That's pretty good. See how good my measuring is today. So on this pendant, we came up with a design. My wife sometimes helps me with designs. And then we pick stones for it, and sometimes it takes a while to figure out which stones we're going to use. But it's not always that way. Sometimes I find a stone and then I use the stone as inspiration for the design. So it's interesting what sometimes the ways people do things differently. If you guys are metalsmiths, any of you watching this, how do you do it? Do you use a stone to inspire you, or do you come up with a design and then seek out a stone? Or sometimes one way and sometimes the other, like me. My worst part is matching stones. I'm not very good at that. So I generally consult with my spousal unit about that one. She's better at matching colors than me. Okay, now is the, see how close we got on this one. Actually pretty good. Size-wise, this particular stone doesn't have sharp corners. It's actually a, if you look at it real close, it's got flat corners here. So it's kind of an asymmetrical octagon. That means we have to kind of flatten the corners just a little bit. I think I'm going to call that good enough. Okay, that's pretty good. I always, when I'm soldering these down onto the bezel, I always take a side that's better than the other side to put on the bottom, because that's going to become the actual profile of the thing. Although on this one, I might leave a little bit sticking out. Maybe I should use 18 for that. Find a piece of 18. That's big enough. Looks like I still got enough solder there. Probably get by with just one, but I'm going to throw two in there. Just because it's always better to have more than not enough, in most cases anyway. There's quite a bit of mass in this thicker sheet. So sometimes if you're doing something like this, a little delicate bezel on top, it might be prudent to do a little heating from the bottom in order to get that sheet up to temperature quicker, because it's sort of protected from the heat by the bezel, and the bezel can melt pretty easily when it's being exposed directly to the heat like that, before the bottom piece ever gets up to the temperature you need it to be. So heating from the bottom is a good idea, at least to start. A lot of people use those tripods so you can access the bottom and heat it more easily that way. I could see where that would be handy sometimes. Now we file. I think I'm going to leave that sharp pointed for now. I may round those out later. So I'm marking the center of this square, or as close as I can eyeball it. And I'll use the center punch. Okay, I'm going to just use the Dremel to drill a little hole in there, and then I'm going to see if I can shape it with a file. If not, we can use the jeweler's saw to make it kind of squarish, but I think we can probably just do it with the file. We'll see. Well, I decided to go with the saw today since I didn't drill it very centered. So it'll be easier to cut out a little square this way, I think. Let's see, I'm not super good with the jeweler's saw, but I'll do my best. That's pretty close. And clean it up with a file from there, I think. Okay. Gonna be kind of like that. It'll be sitting a lot lower though, because the point will be sitting right in that thing, because I'll file this bezel down shorter. So. Alright, I think that's probably good enough for what we're doing right now. Alright, so it's pretty close. Okay, let's center these guys. Pretty close to the center. That's one way you can check to see if you have the centers. If you're doing two pieces, you flip it around and line the ends up. Should still be the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to file a notch right where this mark is with the corner of the file, which will allow me to bend this sharply in that spot. this one I'm going about halfway through, maybe just a slight bit more than that, but you can see it's got kind of a notch like that. We'll do that on both of them. Now I'm going to bend them right where that is. It allows us to get more of a steep bend in there without having it quite so rounded. Since I'm going to try and make these pretty close to the same, I want to make sure that I have them bent about the same angle. That's pretty close. Okay. Now I'm going to solder these closed so that that can't move anymore. There's quite a bit of metal in these ones, so it may take a little bit longer to heat them up to the soldering temperature. Okay, so let's think about this. These are going to be flattened out some, so I'm going to taper these in a little bit. I think we'll pound this flat, and we may pound part of this, part of the way down here, because I'm going to twist it so it has kind of a cool twist to it. All right, but let's do a little hammering. Hammer time. Don't think I have my parachute pants anymore, unfortunately. I never actually had those. I'm going to do a little bit of hammering here, so. You get the idea. I'm not going to make you watch me do the second one. So whenever you're pounding on something, it's going to work harden it, and that's where it kind of bending or pounding or stretching or twisting of metal generally causes it to get harder and harder. The way to get that to soften back up again is called annealing, and to anneal you just bring the metal up to kind of a dull red color and then let it cool off, and that softens it back up again. Let that cool for a minute. So now I'm going to do a little cleaning up of the file. See if I can't get these to look a little neater and symmetrical. I may go back at the end and curve it a little bit more. Really what I want to do is twist this. To give it some kind of a three-dimensionality. It's gonna, these are way longer than they're going to end up being, because I don't want it to be much bigger than about that, probably. I'm going to eyeball in the center of the bezel here and about how far away I want this thing to be from it. So kind of right there. I'm just going to cut that off and see how it looks. That's not bad. Kind of looks like an eye. That's okay, I just need to get things bent a little bit better. That's pretty close, I think. It's the easiest to solder it when it's sitting upside down like this. There you are. We need to probably do a little cleanup filing. And I have to do a little playing with this to get it to look nice and symmetrical, probably. Gonna do a little Dremel cleanup here. Okay, so I used the Dremel with an abrasive white wheel to kind of smooth it out, and it allowed me to see where it needed to be adjusted, to be bent a little bit. Okay, first step, I think, solder a piece of this 12 gauge to the top of the bezel here. Still got a piece of solder there, that should be enough. Just trying to determine how much of that I need to leave there. Since this thing slopes that way a little bit, like inwards, I'm going to file this so it slopes down just a little bit. That looks pretty good. Let's solder those two together. That looks pretty good, but then it always looks pretty good until I solder it. Quite a bit more mass in this band part than there is the bezel, so much of the heat's going to go there. And solder. I think probably the easiest way to do this one is to pick a little bit of solder on there and then just tuck it up under there and then hit the whole thing with heat. Now I have to figure out how high above this I want this one to be. Probably about that high, I think. those hidden veils on. Kind of push this down in here so nothing moves too much. This is called magnesia block. And then I'm going to find that little, I have some 12 gauge, 10 gauge, 12 gauge, probably a half round plier. If you turn the rounded side to the inside of this, and then we'll make two little rings here that kind of go on the back. The rounded side being on the inside makes for a nice smooth chain draw. Okay, now I don't want these to be super deep, otherwise it'll stick out too far from the back of the pendant, but we want to have enough room to run a decent chain through there. That looks pretty good to me. So now, throw a bunch of solder on here and then I can just pick solder those, theoretically. Okay, so let's let him pickle for a while. Okay, so off camera I did a few things. After I pulled it out of the pickle, I didn't particularly like the geometry of the piece that I had. It was too narrow and made it look too much like an eyeball. And so I cut this out and cut this one off, the top part off, and then I reshaped it a little bit more into kind of a, I don't know what you'd call it, a rounded diamond shape. Put a little bit longer piece back on here, soldered this back on, and then I did a little pre-polishing. So normally for these videos I've been polishing them mostly and then setting the stones, but on this one I think I'm going to do it the way I used to do it when I was just doing it without filming it. And so I'm going to set the stones and then we'll polish it. And the reason I'm going to do that is because trying to get this polished up nice around here with the slope going in towards the bezel is going to be hard to do without tearing that bezel with the polishing wheel. So I'm going to get the stone in there so I can grind it in there without damaging anything. I think that'll help. So okay, so I cut a couple of pieces of tag board here to put as backing for this. So first I'm going to push this in straight up against the stone. Normally I use this part, but I have a kind of a confined space here to do this in because of this outer part. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kind of burnish this one. So far that looks pretty good. See how close I fine-tuned this one. One thing I would note on things with corners like this, when you try to compress too much bezel into a space like that, sometimes you get wrinkles. And so what I've done is I've very carefully filed the bezel thinner, just a tiny bit on each corner, so that it has less metal to compress into that small space. So straight on. I'm going to check periodically from the side to make sure it's sitting flat. Sometimes you push too hard on one side and it pops up on the other side. Now we'll go back to the sides again. Once you feel like you have things pushed down all the way, then you can go to the rounded outer part here. I'm going to do that burnishing stage on this. Okay. So far so good, I think. I need a little kneading up down here on the bezel, but after that I'm going to go polish it. Alright, that was the Labradorite and Tourmaline pendant. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. I appreciate it if you'd subscribe as well. I have a growing channel and lots of content coming out. I put 3 videos out a week, and I think it's a good place for, especially for beginners who are learning how to do this. Don't forget, I have a Patreon as well if you want a more intensive experience, and also visit my website for pieces that I've made in the past that you might want to purchase. So, thanks again for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.